This is Wickett on Wisconsin. My name's Mike Wickett. After 10 years in Milwaukee talking sports, I took a bit of a break, but now I'm back and here to talk about the Packers, the Bucks, the Brewers, and more with you. And now inside the Koss Headphone Studios, this is Wickett on Wisconsin with me, Mike Wickett. All right, it is a busy time if you're a Green Bay Packers fan, and our guest this week on Wickett on Wisconsin on the podcast, he used to just be our friend over at the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel way back in the day, but he has gone big time. Here to talk about a little about the Packers and Jags, but more so on the Packers and the Colts from ESPN.com. Packers insider Rob Demovsky is with us. Rob, appreciate the time so much. Before we get to the Packers and whatnot, I remember the day when you let us know at 1250 The Fan that you were going big time, and we were like, what in the world are we going to do? What was it like for you to get that call to go to ESPN? Not that there's anything wrong with the Journal-Sentinel,
Right.
but to go to the mothership.
Yeah, well, so it was the Press Gazette, actually, which is now part of the Journal-Sentinel combined. But look, Mike, I had never imagined, working at a place like ESPN. It was just, it was this big entity. And basically, it was an offer I couldn't refuse. And, that's just sort of the way this business goes. You never really know when things are going to happen. So you just sort of roll with it. And here it's been 7.5 years. And I grew a beard this year. And
that didn't start pre-COVID. That didn't start pre-ESPN.
Right. That's my suit hanging up here for when I actually have to go on TV. I'm in my Lambeau office. And look, I'm more comfortable in the zip up, the half zip Under Armour, but if I got to throw a suit on and they'll put this on TV, go with it, right?
That's fantastic. I mean, when it happened, in all seriousness, we were all so happy for you. We didn't want to see you leave. We didn't want to see, because we weren't an ESPN affiliate either, so
Right.
we really couldn't talk to our friend Rob Demovsky anymore. But it was. I remember the first time I was watching SportsCenter, and they're like, let's go to Rob Demovsky. I'm like, I know that guy. And then there you are standing doing your first stand-up at Lambeau. So congratulations on it.
I'll tell you a quick story real quick about television. I did a few of them right away, but the first big time, where they put me on TV over and over was the day after Rodgers broke his collarbone in 2013. If I'm not mistaken, that was either a Sunday night or a Monday night game. And you know how it is, Mike, when you're working a late game, you get done working at 2 a.m, and all of a sudden SportsCenter wants me on like the 6 Eastern show. They think the world operates on Eastern time. And here, I think it's bad in Central time. I feel bad for our West Coast people, but I'm out there, in front of the Lambeau statues and the front of the stadium at 6 a.m. doing live television and literally had no idea what I was doing. I've got somebody talking to my ear. We're going to roll sound. I don't even know what rolling sound means. I was a newspaper guy, right? So,
that's awesome.
Yeah,
that is awesome. And it's great to see someone stay somewhere for so long, because you and I know how the business works, how you can be gone very, very quickly, but you have had sustained success at ESPN. Do you feel like the industry that you're in right now, is it in a rough time? Because I've seen all the cuts that have come to ESPN for some of the high-priced talent and producers, but what you guys do at ESPN.com and that combined with the stuff, I feel like that raises your value.
Yeah, I mean, look, we're fortunate to be part of the NFL group, and the NFL is king. I mean, no matter what is going on in sports, the NFL is always going to drive interest and especially covering a team like the Green Bay Packers. I mean, we get, however many people sign up for your team alerts, and it's like Cowboys, Patriots, Packers. I mean, those are the top in no particular order. It's just there's just such great interest in this team, and certainly that helps. But look, I mean, it's always been a tough business. It's been even tougher, obviously, with the internet taking away, newspaper. Basically value of newspapers, people wanting to charge for content, people not wanting to pay for content. But look, the business is actually, I think, at a pretty good place when you have things like The Athletic, hiring more people, more jobs is always good. So, knock on wood, things are good.
Let's get to the team that you cover on a daily basis, the Green Bay Packers. As we are recording this, they're the number 1 seed in the NFC. I'm a little surprised by that, and I think people would look at this team with its holes. But then again, Rob, every team in the NFC has holes.
No question. Yeah, and I mean, like, your opinion sort of changes week to week. I mean, like, think about the Packers going down to Tampa and getting, just blown out. And then last week, Tampa gets blown out by New Orleans, who the Packers beat. So, part of it's going to be, how you're playing at the time, just get into the thing, sort of like 2010 when, the Packers were 8-6 with 2 games to go and win the last 2 games. And then we all know what happened in those playoff games. And, on home field advantage, that probably means less now with no fans. And I mean, look, the atmosphere here at Lambeau the last couple of home games has been pretty drab. So I'm not so sure that, being on the road and in climate controlled conditions or warm weather, depending on where they go, isn't so bad for this team.
I was just going to ask, because you think, I mean, right now, obviously they just want to keep winning games,
yeah.
But long term, other than getting a week off and assuming COVID allows this to happen,
right.
Is everybody just dead set on the 1 seed, or is it, not as valuable as it was before?
Yeah, I don't think it's as valuable. Now, you'll never hear those guys say it because they want the bye. They want, they want to be at home. But I'm not sure that it means that much. I mean, like, there was a stat going into this past week that I think the home teams had won less than 50% of the games in the NFL. I think it was like 48%, at home. So you're talking about more road wins slightly. I don't know what it broke down, as this past weekend, but it's just, the last time there was any juice at Lambeau was the Monday night game against Atlanta, and only probably because it was a primetime game. There were obviously no fans, but, Rodgers said after the game against Jacksonville that maybe they should just play the roll out the barrels, do the beer races, because the players don't feel any energy. Obviously, that's stuff for fans, but I don't know what the answer is, but it's definitely it's drab is the best word I can come up with for what it feels like at Lambeau. Now, I haven't been to. I'm not traveling this year. First time in 20 some years that I haven't gone to a road game, so I don't know exactly what it feels like at the stadiums that have 10 or 12,000 fans, but it seems like the Packers seem to do better in those environments.
I bet if you got Aaron Rodgers off microphone or off the record, I bet he wouldn't mind going back to New Orleans or playing at TCF Bank Stadium or
right.
wherever they play at in Minnesota.
Yep.
I mean, I don't feel like U.S. Bank Stadium, excuse me.
Yep.
I don't think that they really would mind going to a controlled environment where they're not playing in Green Bay, Wisconsin in January.
Yeah, and Rodgers said yesterday, he's like, look, it was the rain, the cold, and the wind sort of leveled the playing field. I mean, they were a 13.5 point favorite yesterday, and the conditions probably knocked some of that down. And, should they have played better and won by more? Yeah, but they did win. But I think he's right that the conditions sometimes level the playing field and aren't that big of an advantage.
I mean, I know last time they were in Arizona, things didn't work out well. I mean, it was a dramatic end to that game.
Right.
But going down to Arizona, some of those other NFC stadiums would be nice. Hey, real quick, we do want to touch on Jacksonville before we get on to Indy and the big signing of David Bakhtiari. But that weather and that effort, when you're watching that game, and I'm sitting on my couch and I see it all over Twitter and everything, it just looked like the Packers didn't care. Did you get that kind of vibe?
Yeah, I definitely felt that. I mean, it looked to me like they looked like they thought they could just show up and beat a 1-win team. Now, is that really what, was going on in their subconscious? I don't know. Or, was it a combination of things where the weather was a factor? Maybe the game plan just wasn't great. I will say this, teams that seem to give them trouble are teams with really fast, active fronts, especially at the linebacker spot. And we saw it, with Tampa and Levante David and Devin White. And yesterday, if the Jaguars have anything going for them, it's their inside linebackers with Schobert and Miles Jack. So, there is a little bit of that those types of teams do give them trouble. But I would agree with you, Mike. It was it just looked like kind of a half-hearted. Do they really think they need to give it their all to beat a bad team?
I will say that
a bad team with a backup rookie quarterback
making his second start and in his entire career. I will say I was agreeing with that idea that they didn't really give it their A effort. Super Bowl contenders sometimes give it don't always let me take that back. Teams that aren't Super Bowl contenders give it a C effort against a 1-win team and lose.
Right.
So I don't think the let's say the Tampa Bay Buccaneers or the Steelers would give a C effort and lose. Kind of like Green Bay. Does that make sense?
It does, but I will say this, and I wrote this yesterday after the game, that basically, look, I mean, you can hem and haw over that, but the bottom line is they did win the game, and what will be more telling is not how you play against bad teams, but next week against Indianapolis, because I think that's, probably going to be the best team, maybe them in Tennessee, that they play, from here on out. So, hey, look, you got your win against a bad team. You didn't give it the greatest effort. You learned from it. But to me, what's going to be more telling about this team is not how you play against the bad teams, but how you play against the really good teams. And I think we will have a better feel for what they are after next Sunday, because look, the last time they played a really, really good team, and I don't even know if they're that great, but was Tampa, and they got obliterated.
I was just going to ask, how good is Indianapolis?
Yeah, I think their defense is really good. Obviously, they run the ball well. Rivers is not what he was and has not really had a very good year at all. And, they're probably going to get some takeaway opportunities off of him. But I think they've got a really, really strong defense, especially their front. And that's sort of the kind of recipe that gives them trouble. So, outside of just division games, because they're division games and, how important they are, they still play Chicago twice. I still think this game might be their biggest and best from here on out in the last, 7 games they have.
They have the second easiest schedule, the back half of the teams in the NFL. Baltimore's is easier. Yep. Don't tell them that about Sunday night, which just happened against the New England Patriots. But would it surprise you if this team was 12-4, 13-3?
12-4 is exactly what I sort of thought when I reevaluated it after the halfway point. I originally had them as 11-5, but in that 11-5, I think I had them starting 2-2 with losses at Minnesota and New Orleans, which obviously won both those games. So I think 12-4 is reasonable. I mean, let's see how Chicago, if they can right the ship here, between now and the next couple of weeks. But they're certainly on a downward trend. Detroit. They seem to be just kind of mediocre and they're done with Minnesota. So, I think 12-4 is going to be really realistic. And now that probably puts you in a tiebreaker conversation for that number 1 seed.
It's amazing, though. Social media would tell you this team was 2-7 and not 7-2.
Yeah, that's how it is. And which is why I think, obviously had they lost yesterday, the sky would be falling. Sometimes it's just important just to find a way to win. And look, that's what they did last year in a lot of cases and didn't play great. Now it caught up with them at the end against, the 49ers when they were exposed. But I don't think there's a complete team in the NFC this year that's going to, present that type of thing.
The 2-7, 7-2 flip that Packers fans seem to have on social media, on Twitter, is always followed by fire Mike Pettin. Yeah. I want to ask you about the defense and this coordinator. I mean, the book is out. I'm surprised James Robinson didn't run the ball 30 times, only ran the ball 20 times. And especially in a windy day with a rookie quarterback, and the game script said this is still a close football game. There's no need to keep throwing, but that's on Jacksonville's coaching staff.
Yeah, just looking at my play sheet here. So from yesterday, they threw it on the first time for 11 yards. And then it was Robinson run for 6, Robinson run for 6, Robinson run for 6. Then it's 2nd and 4 at the Packers 33-yard line, and they throw it 2 more times. And okay, what are you doing? And then, the next series they run it for 6 and 20 to start, and they don't get anything out of it. So yeah, look, you're right, Mike. The defense it's the way to beat these. The run defense is suspect. It's the way to beat these guys. I cannot figure out what they are trying to do to stop the run other than this. When they hired Mike Pettin as coordinator, I remember calling Rex Ryan, who was Pettin's mentor, and the whole conversation was about 2 things. It was about edge rushers and about corners. Like that's what he never even talked about run defense. And then more and more I talk to people about it. That's what this scheme is built on. It's pressure from the edge and having shut down corners, right? They had Revis, didn't they? And when they were with the was it Jets or Baltimore?
Jets.
Yeah, I can't even remember. But and then they had really good rushers, and it's like they don't pay a lot of attention to the inside, the inside linebacker specifically. And you can fault Brian Gutekunst for not addressing inside linebacker with a higher pick or whatever. But if he's sitting there thinking, well, I've got a defense that doesn't value that position, and I'm not going to give them spend a high pick on a player that they're not going to put in a playmaking position. So it's all got to work hand in hand. And look, I understand in the NFL, it's hard with the salary cap and all those limitations to have, top-notch players at all these different positions. Sometimes you just have to get by with rookies and minimum salary guys, but it sure doesn't seem like they value that middle linebacker, that inside linebacker spot. And I think that's why it's exposed. That idea is exposed when it comes to teams that want to run the ball.
Every time Patrick Queen makes a tackle, a Jordan Love hater starts to cry. I think that's the way it goes.
Like, I just wrote a blurb, and I'm not sure it's going to run sometime on ESPN.com this week. It may even be out already by the time this airs. But it was they asked us every week. We do these things that like all 32 teams answer the same question. The reporters does, and this week's was what a do-over for this year for every team. And I said, not drafting Jordan Love, trading up to take Patrick Queen. Like, that's exactly the type of guy that you would think they could use. Now, again, if they're not going to use him the way he needs to be used, then it's probably not a good pick. But first of all, who knew Rodgers was going to play this great and make it look like he could play 3-4 more years, so you don't need the quarterback in the future? But that's funny that you mentioned that, because that was my quote-unquote do-over move for them this year is trading up, fine, but trade up to take Patrick Queen, who I think went 28th, if I'm not mistaken.
He went right after. He went right after the Jordan Love
27th
pick.
Then. So yeah, to me that's it's funny that you mentioned that, because I was thinking the exact same thing.
Like, I don't wish ill will on Patrick Queen, but I get mad every time I watch a Ravens game and he makes a tackle, and I'm like, I understand the Jordan Love pick. I get the Jordan Love pick. Actually, the more complaining on social media that I see, the more I love the Jordan Love pick.
Yeah,
but
again, it's nothing against, even as Roger said, it's nothing against Jordan Love. And I remember sitting down at the first combine that Brian Gutekunst was the general manager, and he did a side session with the writers. And one of the things I asked him was, how much of your legacy do you think will ultimately be determined by your ability to find the next franchise quarterback? Because that's part of being the general manager here. And, he looked at me and he said, I'm not thinking about that right now, but I understand, why you're asking it, because, Ron Wolf got Favre, Ted got Rodgers. At some point, he's going to have to do it. And here it was, two years later that he makes that move. And look, maybe he made it early in the sense that maybe it gives him 2 cracks at it if Rodgers plays 3 or 4 more years and they think Jordan Love. It might be far-fetched, but maybe he did it earlier to say, hey, I'm going to watch Jordan Love for 2 years, and if he's not the guy, well, then I'll take another quarterback.
You were talking about the salary cap, and at 11:14 p.m. on Saturday night, if you're following David Bakhtiari on Twitter, he tweeted out a face emoji, a smiley face emoji.
Yeah.
And nobody really knew what the heck that meant. That's just a football player on a Saturday night tweeting out an emoji. Well, we found out, middle of the third quarter, I think news started to roll out, whether it was
maybe even fourth quarter.
Was it? And we found out that the biggest contract for a base salary for an offensive lineman just happened.
Right.
When I for whatever reason felt like Bakhtiari was about 4 years older than he actually is.
Yeah.
Is this the right move for Green Bay to lock Bakhtiari up, considering the tread on the tires argument? Do you think it matters, or was this the right move?
I think it was for a couple of reasons. One, what is he, 29 or about to turn 29?
Feels like he's 35, but man, he's just been around forever.
Yes, because he started right away as a rookie. I mean, how many guys get thrown in at left tackle as a rookie, and he's never given up the job? But here's why I think it is the right move. First of all, left tackles, you don't get those guys very often in the 4th round. And now they did there, but the chance of repeating that and getting a franchise left tackle somewhere other than the 1st or 2nd round is really rare. So if you don't re-sign him, you almost have to it locks you in to now I've got to use my 1st or 2nd round pick on a left tackle. It's just a must. You're not then helping your team. You're just maintaining your team. So by signing him to a deal that, I think is going to look okay, even though the numbers are monstrous, I think it's going to be okay from a salary cap standpoint and not, put them in a bad situation. I think it's a no-brainer. Look, if they don't re-sign Aaron Jones, fine. I mean, you can find running backs in the 4th round, the 5th round, which is where, they found Williams and Jones. But it's really hard. I know I just said Bakhtiari is a 4th round pick, but it's really hard to find an all-pro, Pro Bowl, 10-year starting left tackle outside of the 1st or 2nd round. So from that standpoint, I think it is. I'll tell you a quick story, Mike. In the spring, right after the combine, I think it was, I talked to a scout and a position coach from other teams. And I said, hey, the Packers have 5 starters that are going to be free agents after the season. Kevin King, Corey Linsley, Aaron Jones, David Bakhtiari, and Kenny Clark. Rank them in order 1 through 5 of who you would re-sign, first to last. And they all gave me, or both of them gave me the same exact order. It was Bakhtiari, Clark, Linsley, Jones, and King. Now they've knocked out those first 2. Linsley, one of the coaches said, hey, good teams re-sign centers. Not everybody does, but really good teams with good quarterbacks re-sign centers. So Linsley would be next on that list. And then Aaron Jones would be 4th. And, Kevin King last for a number of reasons. One, most likely the injury history.
Stay healthy, man. That guy can't get on the field.
Right. But here's the thing with him: the more he gets hurt, the lower the price goes. So maybe it's a cheap re-signing. But the point is, I think most people around the league would say you re-sign your stud big people, and that's what they did.
Linsley was graded out as Pro Football Focus's #1 center in the National Football League at the halfway point. So
it's just hard to pay. It's hard to pay centers premium, and that's why the coach said, hey, good teams pay centers, but it's not always possible.
Hey, Rob, I know you got to get to a media session. I appreciate you jumping on with me. It's good to catch up to you or catch up with you. And good luck and continued success. Keep rocking over there at ESPN.com.
Well, thanks, Mike. It's really good to catch up with you again, and I miss the old days of you, Gary, Sparky, Leroy. But it's fun to catch up with you guys.
I remember sitting around drinking beers at the Packer house. God, what was that?
I passed that. I drive by that house every day on my way into the stadium, and I think about those training camp nights when you guys were up here doing your show, and
nothing's changed. It's all still the same. Now it's a completely different world than it was 10 years ago.
Yeah, I just hope we can get back to next season some semblance of normalcy, because I miss seeing everybody in the press box. It's just so isolated and just so weird covering a team.
Are you allowed to leave your press room, or do you have to sleep in that office?
No, I get tested every day. I'm one of the few. There's 4 of us, I think, in the Green Bay, Wisconsin media that go through the nasal testing every day. And so I'm allowed in this office. And then we're in a separate part of the press box than the non-testing people. So
how is the test every day? Are you used to it now?
I mean, it's not the damn it high up there. It's a swab though. I mean, they stick the Q-tip in there and bring it around your nostrils. And so every day since about August 10th or so. So what is that going on? 3 months of testing every single day. And knock on wood, I've been coronavirus free every time.
No words. Rob, appreciate the time, my friend. Take care. I'll talk with you again soon.
All right, we'll be seeing you.
My thanks to Rob Demovsky for joining me. Dude is one of the best in the business and an old friend, so it's good to see Rob have sustained success at the highest level, especially in a time these days where so many guys are losing their gigs and ESPN making those cuts. But that NFL machine keeps on trucking, so thanks to Rob, and check out all of his work at ESPN.com. Listen, there has been so much Bucs news. I have been wanting to get the Bucs half of this podcast on the air for you, but every day I want to do something about the Milwaukee Bucks. This week there has been news, so everything would have been dated. Like, for example, I talked to Rob way early in the week, but 2 days, I think on Monday, I think is when I interviewed Rob, and I've been sitting on that interview, and today's Saturday the 21st. And I said, all right, well, the trading opens in the NBA coming up now, so I'm going to wait and do the Bucks stuff after I see what the Bucks do at the trade, when the trading window opens in the NBA. And so I waited and then woke up on Tuesday like everybody else to the news that they had sent out some picks and some role players out, and they brought in Drew Holiday, and we're working on a sign and trade with Bogdan Bogdanovic out of Sacramento. And I'm like, all right, cool, I can't wait. Let's do a podcast about all of that. Well, the draft is tomorrow, so let's just hold off and see. Even though they won't have a first-round pick, maybe they move back in. We'll see what they do. And I don't want to have to do a second Bucks podcast this week about the second-round picks. I'm like, all right, I'll hold off. And then you find out a little later in the day, if not the next day, so now I think we're up to like Wednesday or something, that the trade is being nixed by the NBA, and the Bucks are being investigated for tampering. And I was like, oh, man, I could do a whole podcast just about selective tampering by the NBA, and I'll do that next week because this is simply about the NBA and their selective tampering and wanting to get Giannis out of Milwaukee. More on that still to come. So I'm like, well, let me hold off on this. So let's see what happens a little bit later and what moves they're going to make. And then it became Friday, and I'm like, well, they're going to do something over the weekend. So my pledge to you, if you've made it this far in the podcast, is that I will be doing a Bucks-heavy podcast next week once we know what the moves are. But I do want to say this about the Drew Holiday move or the potential Bogdanovic move. It would have been great to have Bobo in there or whatever else the Milwaukee Bucks decide to do now that the offseason is here, this very short offseason. Unless they're bringing in LeBron, Anthony Davis, Steph Curry, unless they're bringing in an absolute elite-level superstar. Look, I like Drew Holiday. I would have loved to have seen Bobo within the starting five. It would have been maybe the best starting five in the East, 1 to 5. I know that the Nets are going to have something to say about that. By the way, if you're watching on the video, do you like my holiday mug? It is Frosty the Snowman that I'm drinking coffee out of it this morning. But all that being said, unless they were going to be bringing in an elite level player, none of it matters. I'm not saying the Bucks can't win a title. I'm not saying the Bucks can't challenge for the East. I'm not saying they can't do better than they did last year. Nothing matters on the trade front or the free agent acquisition front until Giannis can hit a jumper, all right? And he doesn't have the luxury of the 3-month off season, and I don't know what he did between the NBA shutting down and the opening of the bubble. But from the looks of it, what we saw down in Orlando, it was not work on his jump shot, and it certainly was not work on his free throw shooting. I said this all throughout the playoffs, and I did a podcast every time the Bucks played, immediately following the game. I would rather Giannis become an 80% free throw shooter than a 40% three-point shooter. And I mean that. You can bring in Drew Holiday and Bobo, and I know that last night they re-signed Connaughton. Big whoop. Until Giannis can become a good free throw shooter. I don't need him to be John Stockton 95% or whatever. I don't need him to be Steph Curry or Kawhi Leonard or James Harden at the free throw line. But I need him to be 78, 82%, something in there. Because as we saw, teams are going to hammer him. It's the old hack-a-shack. Now it's hack-a-Greek freak, hack-a-freak, whatever you want to call it. I would do it because the dude's a bad free throw shooter. For being a superstar, I mean, imagine if he averaged 30-some points per game this year. Imagine if he hit 80% of his free throws. And along with that, it doesn't matter about Drew Holiday or Bobo or whoever they bring in. If Giannis can't do anything but straight line drive on a consistent basis, the Bucks are never going to win an NBA title. And what sucks is Giannis doesn't have the 3-month off season to be in the gym every day shooting 5,000 jumpers and 5,000 free throws like I implored him to do 2 off seasons ago. Every Bucks fan should want that. It's great. He can drive to the basket. When he's 3 feet in, he's long enough to basically dunk from anywhere within 3 feet of the basket. That's great. He doesn't have a baby hook that's reliable. He doesn't have a 15-foot jumper that's reliable. He's not a reliable free throw shooter. Giannis is exciting. Giannis is great. Giannis is great for the city of Milwaukee, one of the all-time great Bucks already. He's a 2-time MVP. But if Giannis can't shoot, it doesn't matter who they bring in. on this level. Now, if they were able to bring in Kevin Durant or LeBron or AD or Dame Lillard or whomever, somebody of that elite level play in the NBA, all right, fine. Giannis, do your thing. You got your other scorer. But Drew Holiday's a 15-point per game guy. Bobo's a 15-point per game guy. Chris Middleton's your number 2. He's your Robin. He's a 20-point per game guy. Until the Bucks can figure out how to make Giannis a good shooter, it doesn't matter who they're bringing in. Giannis has to improve his game. That's the next level. I hope that's what he's been doing because the NBA season starts in a month. All right? This weird COVID follow-up to the COVID non-bubble, I don't even know what's going to happen. There's going to be some shutdowns. It's going to happen. I don't know all the rules. I don't know all the scheduling. I don't know anything about that. I just know that today is November 21st. The NBA season starts in a month. Giannis isn't going to become a great free throw shooter and a great jump shooter overnight, but he's got a month to improve. And again, it doesn't matter at all who they bring in, unless they bring in one of those blue chip top level dudes. And none of those guys are coming to Milwaukee right now because they don't have the capital to bring in Steph Curry now that Klay Thompson's hurt. That's not going to happen, although that would be really, really cool. Next week, hopefully, we will know who the addition is. Maybe it still winds up being Bogdanović. That would be really cool if it is Bobo still coming in. That would be neat. We'll see. Is he going to go chasing after a couple extra $1 million and go play with the New York Knicks? Or he's going to take the 3 years at $17 million that the Bucks could have given him before this, air quotes, tampering situation happened and come play for a title? Because if you give me Drew at the 1, Chris at the 2, Bobo at the 3, Giannis at the 4, and Brook at the 5, that's a pretty darn good starting 5 in the East. East is going to be loaded this year now that the Nets get Kevin Durant back. Going to be absolutely a dogfight in the Eastern Conference. The Heat, the Bucks, the Nets. A lot of these teams are really, really good and are making additions, and we'll find out. Again, next week we'll do a whole big Bucks podcast. Obviously, I'm going to be on doing it. I'll have another podcast for you after the Packers and the Indianapolis Colts. Thank you so much for watching. Please review the podcast. It helps me grow the podcast wherever you're listening to it, on Apple or Google or Spotify or wherever you may be listening to it. I would definitely appreciate that. We're on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, everywhere. Please tell a friend about the podcast, especially if they are a Wisconsin sports fan. Until next time, my name is Mike Wickett. Thank you for checking out Wickett on Wisconsin. Up until next time, go Pack, go Bucks, and go Brewers.
Thanks for listening to Wickett on Wisconsin. If you have any feedback or you want to reach out to the show, you can find me on Facebook, Mike Wickett Podcasts, or you can email MikeWickettPodcasts@gmail.com.
And you can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Mike Wickett.
Thanks to Silverman Sound Studios for providing the music for today's show. And you can find us anywhere you find your podcasts, including Apple, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Until next week, thanks for listening to Wickett on Wisconsin.